that was kind of fun. From Courier Newsroom, this is Up North News Radio. I'm Pat Kreitlow on this Friday morning, January 3rd, 2025, here in beautiful Chippewa Falls, where it's 10 degrees right now. But we knew that. It's winter. We're going to be cold for a while here. Coming up, the new Congress gets going today. Speaker Mike Johnson can only afford to lose one vote, and we've got the audio from the one vote. So if this guy, once you hear from him, if this guy's not going to vote for Mike Johnson and it only takes one more, well, that should be an interesting soap opera happening there. Also coming up on the program today, we will have former U.S. Attorney Jim Santelle joining us early at 6:30 this morning. So we get a little extra time to talk to him about his days working as an intern in the Jimmy Carter White House, as he remembers the 39th president, whose funeral will be held next week. And then a special guest at 7:05, Dianne Hesselbein is the state Senate Democratic leader. She will preview the upcoming session of the Wisconsin Legislature that kicks off on Monday. Mark Jacob will talk about media coverage of the Trump transition at 7:30. Dan Schumacher will join us at 7:50 to answer the question, can the Bears beat the Packers for the 12th time in a row this weekend? The answer is yes, of course they can, but will they? That's another matter. In the meantime, I'll let you cool your jets here. We are going to get this show started 3 minutes from now, 6:06, all across the Civic Media Radio Network. We'll see you soon.
All across Wisconsin from Civic Media, this is Up North News Radio. Now, live from our Lake Minnesota studio, Here's the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Brightlow.
Well, hey there, Wisconsin. Good morning. It is 6:06 on this Friday morning, January 3rd, 2025. And it's another beautiful day to have you here up north, live from Lake Wissota, from wherever you're listening across the Civic Media Radio Network, or through the app, or by podcast, or watching us on Facebook or YouTube. It's nice to have you along. Starting your Friday and ending your week right here, I've got a question for you. Do you still have a checkbook? Do you still write checks anymore? This is normally the time of year where, every year they say, well, if you write a check, be sure you write 2025 instead of 2024. And I mean, I don't make that joke usually because I can't tell you the last time I wrote a check. Yesterday, I needed to write 2 checks. So I had to pull out this checkbook, and one for property taxes and one for something else where they only wanted checks. And I had to double check on here. And this particular checkbook, the first, you've got the carbon copies. The first check in this particular book was written in 2017. I mean, we used to go through multiple, checkbooks a year back in the day, and now it's years to use up one of them. But I did write 2025, so I'm kind of proud of myself that way for getting that right. Coming up on the program today, we're again continuing to juggle the schedule a little bit because of the holidays. Kia Vakil is off for one more week. We'll talk with him next week, national correspondent for Courier Newsroom. But at 6:30, we will talk to former U.S. Attorney Jim Santelle. We normally talk to him at 7:20. He's going to join us at 6:30. We've got a little extra time to spend with him because as folks are sharing their memories of former President Jimmy Carter, Jim Santelle, as a college kid at Marquette, had the opportunity to intern in the Jimmy Carter White House. And will talk to us about that experience long before he served as U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Wisconsin. So that's at 6:30. So then at 7:06, we're going to have State Senate Democratic Leader Dianne Hesselbein in, and she will help us preview the upcoming session of the Wisconsin Legislature that will get going on Monday. The new Congress begins today. Senate Republicans quickly decided on who would replace Mitch McConnell as their leader. House Republicans, on the other hand, well, they'll gather at noon and start to vote on a speaker. Whether Mike Johnson's going to get it on the first ballot is definitely a fair question. We'll talk to Mark Jacob about media coverage of this week's opening of Congress and the Trump transition. And then Dan Schumacher helps us wrap things up around 7:50 to talk about sports. Of course, the show's resident Bears fan will say no when we ask him, will the Packers defeat the Bears for the 12th time in a row this weekend? And if time allows, we're also going to go over the rules for a new kind of indoor professional golf league. It sounds a little weird, or it just might work. It just might be TV friendly enough to get some traction. So we'll talk about that yet this morning. Temperatures at the bus stop go like this. It's 10 degrees here on Lake Wissota, 8 in Amory, 8 in Hayward. Wausau, you're at 11 degrees right now. La Crosse, 12. Wisconsin Rapids, 11 degrees. Green Bay, 19. Madison, 15. It's 14 in Waukesha right now. And as always, the tropical temperature reading for Wisconsin is at Radio Park in Racine, right there along the Lake Michigan lakeshore, where it is, 20 degrees. Slathering on the SPF 5 below is one Greg Bach, who joins us on this Friday morning from Radio Park. Mr. Bach, good morning. How art thou?
I art thou good. And I feel for you with the whole check thing. Who wants to write a check nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, Roger chimes in on Facebook. I still have a checkbook. My signature is the only cursive I write, which is actually, yes, a very good point. I don't use cursive for anything else. It's indecipherable anyway, but then again, so is my regular handwriting. But yeah, fair point. But there's still a couple of places where you got to write the checkbook, you got to write the check out, but nothing like it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, what I do now is I go to the bank, I pull a live cashier's check for 2 reasons. 1, I don't want a checkbook. Mm-hmm. 2, the money's immediately out of my account. Had a couple of bad landlords back in the day who would, you give them a check and they'd wait like 2-3 weeks because they're on their time. And I'm like a 22-year-old who's living paycheck to paycheck. And yeah, so I just did away with regular checks.
The only time I see checks now, and I've mentioned this before, and it is set out of love and gratitude, is, when I go check the Up North News post office box, P.O. Box 27 in Chippewa Falls. And when we do little pledge drives for Up North News, and we get just the sweetest notes and the same handwriting from these wonderful older folks, usually ladies, that attach a nice little Post-it note saying how much they like what we do, and then we have to get all those checks cashed in. But other than that, I really wouldn't see any at all. So Roger does. As far as the rest of you, whether you want to weigh in on, are you still writing checks, or do you live in a place where you've got people that, they just, your local grocery store, they prefer it that way? You can reach us at 855-75-CIVIC, 855-752-4842. Or, of course, you can use the Civic Media app to call us or text us. And you can also put a comment on our page at YouTube or Facebook. That's the Up North News YouTube page, the Up North News Facebook page, the Civic Media Facebook page as well. Hey, it's Friday.
It's very much Friday.
What's happening at the Laughing Tap this weekend?
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked there, Patrick. The Laughing Tap is back in action this weekend. We've got 2 shows this weekend, one Friday, one Saturday. AJ Grill is headlining. He is a Milwaukee favorite. He's got a special on YouTube called I'll Quit When I'm 30. And he'll be headlining tonight and tomorrow with actually great local comics, period. Eric Smith and Aaron Clark also opening as well. So tickets are $22 online, $25 at the door. No drink minimums. It's an easy night out to celebrate. Maybe you want a post New Year's celebration. Maybe you want to do it like that. Yes. You didn't want to go out on Tuesday night. Come out tonight.
Remember, I ran out of time to mention this yesterday during the history lesson, but how yesterday was National New Year's Alternative Day or something like that.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is that, when we were younger and we could not afford, the big fancy night out on New Year's Eve, another couple, the 4 of us, we had the tradition of going out the next night. New Year's, on January 1st, where they were very happy to see you if they were open, being a holiday, but a lot of, bars and things were open, and they were happy to have any customer in there at that point.
Yes.
And you didn't spend as much. So I totally get that. And so folks who maybe skipped New Year's Eve, this is your chance to go see some comedy and, maybe hoist a pint with Mr. Bach.
Oh, you can hoist a point or 2.
Yeah, something like that. Here's the part. Warning. We're about to talk sports. Warning.
Oh, I need a warning button now.
I know. The college football playoffs. We've talked about this with the baseball playoffs and some of the others. What is it about teams when you're supposed to want to get a bye week? You're supposed to want to bye. You're supposed to want to rest up, get healthy. The other team has got to work and grunt all the way through it. The college football playoffs, they seeded all the teams, 1 through 12, and with teams 1 through 4 getting a bye. They skipped that first round. Yeah. And then in the first round, well, it was chalk. So the 5, 6, 7, and 8 teams all advanced to play the 1, 2, 3, and 4 teams. And now at the conclusion of the quarterfinals from yesterday in the college football playoffs, here's your final 4. It's teams 5, 6, 7, and 8. All 4 teams that got a bye were upset. The most recent being that Notre Dame upset number 2 Georgia yesterday in the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans, 23-10. So your final 4 is going to be Notre Dame versus Penn State in the Orange Bowl next Thursday, and Ohio State versus Texas in the Cotton Bowl next Friday. And then the championship game will be in Atlanta on Monday, January 20th. But I don't have any explanation for it, but we've talked about this in other sports. I know there were some past years where the Packers actually got the bye week and then they lost in their first round of the playoffs, So I don't know why that is. I guess losing momentum is tougher than having to get a rest or
Yeah, there might be something to be said about being in the mode. In that mode, you're right, because a week. I don't know. I am married to a woman who was born in Indiana, who comes from deep South Bend roots. So I have to, by law, root for Notre Dame, and I'm glad it worked out for them, especially against Georgia. But that is craziness. That's craziness.
Yes, it is. And so for folks that do follow that, they'll have, again, I doubt, I don't follow betting or anything like that. So I doubt that very few people bet that 5, 6, 7, and 8 would be the final four teams. But if you did, I'm sure the odds were really high, and I'm sure that you're getting set to buy an island or something this weekend with your winnings.
I'm sure it was just a lot of fans of theater and dance are like 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, sorry. Sorry about that one. I apologize.
All right. Back to the Packers for a moment. Packers safety Xavier McKinney was selected as a starter for the Pro Bowl. Do they still have the Pro Bowl?
I was going to be like,
is that more of like a skills contest now, or is it a flag football? I don't even know what it is. I don't know.
No one cares.
Yeah, because none of the All-Star games work really, except the baseball one. The baseball one is still, a pretty good baseball game, though it's getting to be more of an exhibition all the time.
Yeah.
The others, it doesn't work. So, anyway, to the degree of which this is an honor, congratulations to Xavier McKinney. After all, he ranks second in the league in interceptions with 7. And is the first Packer safety to make the team since Clinton Dix in 2016.
Hey, watch your language.
Which I share only because it's been years since anybody's had a reason to say Clinton Dix when talking about the Packers roster.
Oh, God, one of the greatest names ever.
And congratulations as well to Rashawn Gary and Josh Jacobs, who also made the roster, but not as starters. And guard Elgin Jenkins was named a first alternate. As mentioned, the Packers are seeking their 12th straight win over the Bears at Lambeau Field Sunday at noon. Catch the game on WRCO in Richland Center, WCQM in Park Falls, and WRJN in Racine, Kenosha. The Milwaukee Bucks, 2 nights after erasing a 19-point deficit to win at Indiana, the Bucks fell behind 24 points last night against Brooklyn and could not come back and lost to the Nets 113-110. The Bucks will host Portland on Saturday. We'll tell you about Badger men's and women's college hockey because they've got some outdoor action coming up this weekend. And then we'll get into talking about the new Congress and then Jim Santelle coming up in about 15 minutes as well. This is Up North News Radio, live from Lake Wissota on the Civic Media Radio Network. I'm Pat Kreitlow.
jewel, see the love that's sleeping.
The late George Martin, famously the producer for the Beatles, was born 99 years ago today. This is from some of his final work done for the special Love album for Cirque du Soleil, with remixes, mashups, and rarely heard versions of the Beatles songs he produced for all those years. That's a demo version of George Harrison's While My Guitar Gently Weeps, for which Martin wrote a new orchestral score, the only truly new material on the album. If you've never heard it, the Love album by the Beatles, Cirque du Soleil. Highly recommend that. 6:22 now on this Friday, January 3rd, on Up North News Radio. I'm Pat Kreitlow. It's nice to have you along here. Continuing just to preview the weekend in sports, the Badger men's basketball team is back in action tonight. They are hosting Iowa. Coverage begins at 5 this evening on WLAK in Amory, WFHR in Wisconsin Rapids, WRJN in Racine, and WRCE in Richland Center, and on the Civic Media app as well. Badger women's basketball, they play tomorrow at Indiana. Now, the Badger women's hockey team is number 1 in the nation. The Badger women's hockey team is now 20-1 on the season. Their only loss came about 6 weeks ago to Ohio State, the number 2 team in the country. That was clearly on the Badgers' minds last night as the women swarmed all over the Buckeyes, winning last night 6-0. The two teams will face off again tomorrow afternoon, but outside at Wrigley Field in the Frozen Confines tournament. The Badger men aren't having that same kind of season. They are now 9-11-1 so far after losing last night at Michigan State, the top men's team in the nation. And those two teams, the Badgers and Spartans, they too will face off Saturday night, again outside at Wrigley Field in the Frozen Confines tournament. Badger men's basketball hosts Creighton tonight. Badger women's basketball hosts Butler on Saturday afternoon. Up North News has a daily newsletter. You can sign up for it at upnorthnewswi.com. Sign up for our unabashedly Wisconsin news and find us on social media. Just search for Up North News WI on whatever social media platform you prefer. On our Facebook page right now, a story about how roughly half of Wisconsin's special education teachers leave after 5 years. But in some good news, the state is getting more than $10 million from the U.S. Department of Education to help with specialized training and coaching for new special education teachers and leaders. Learn more about that over at our Facebook site. Again, search for Up North News WI. Don't forget the WI to find us on social media. Now, imagine having a job or being up for a job that you really want, but that there are people willing to go on national TV and say they would prefer their bodies to be mutilated than to support you for that job. That's the situation facing Mike Johnson ahead of him, the current Speaker of the House. Recall that, Kevin McCarthy, what did he need? 15 ballots or something like that to get a job that he only held for about 9 months. And then eventually they settled on Mike Johnson. And everybody thought, well, here's this far right, congressman who's going to be, just fall in lockstep. But of course, he also recognized there's this need to, govern. And so he has cheesed off some of his most ardent fellow right wingers to the point where when the new Congress convenes at noon and they hold an election for Speaker, and Mike Johnson has such a slim majority he can only afford to lose one vote, we already know who that one vote is, and it's this Congressman, Thomas Massey, who was interviewed on the OAN network yesterday.
If Chip Roy were asked to serve as chairman of the Rules Committee, would that be enough to get your vote for Mike Johnson?
Oh, no. You can pull all my fingernails out. You can shove bamboo up in them. You can start cutting off my fingers. I am not voting for Mike Johnson tomorrow. And you can take that to the bank. You know that. Who are you voting for, Thomas?
Take that to the bank. Cut off my fingers if need be. I'm not voting for Mike Johnson. But other than that, Speaker Johnson, how are you feeling about your chances? So I bring this up because, most people are like, who cares? It's a speaker's vote. Well, on January 6th is when they have that joint session to certify the presidential election of votes. What if they don't have a speaker by January 6th, by Monday,
Just put it off until Tuesday and then Wednesday, and then it's a set. We gotta,
like everything else. Yeah, we just kick the can.
Also, sir, Representative Massey, a simple no would have done. That's
Yes.
just we didn't need the violent war torn examples you gave us.
It's not that big of a deal, sir. where you have to promise bodily mutilation. But sure, if that's what you want to do.
And on a side note here, congrats to Matt Gaetz on his new show on OAN. That was a clip from his Emmy. No. Webby, no.
If
his mom thinks he's the best.
If there is an award given for the host with the most cosmetic filler in their face, it might be the new Wayne Newton of cable news, Matt Gaetz.
That's a great show. Donkey story for that joke.
It was a lot easier over on the Senate side for Republicans, where Mitch McConnell is stepping down as majority leader after 18 years there, and South Dakota Senator John Thune will take over. It was there were 3 candidates running for the spot, but Senate Republicans quickly assembled behind John Thune, who, by the way, got his Senate seat in South Dakota by defeating Tom Daschle, who had been the Senate Democratic leader back in his day. So now the new Republican Senate leader comes from the state of South Dakota. And in both cases, again, it needs to be said that these leadership qualities, if you could call it that, are going to be needed like never before, because in the Senate, you need 60 votes to do almost anything. Thune seems to think that he can get some of these things done through, parliamentary maneuvers that don't require 60 votes. And I don't know who he's kidding, because there are senators on the Democratic side who read the rules as well. Let's see. Alicia writes on YouTube, Congressman Massey needs to remember that there are kids listening. He says kids, like J.D. Vance. Very good, Alicia.
Boom,
yes,
roasted.
You. That's right. So I'm not here to, dance on the grave of any inability to get something done. All right, well, maybe a little bit, but it's just to again say, to get things done in Washington, Madison, or anywhere takes leadership, compromise, negotiation, an ability to get along well with folks, even if you don't agree with them all the time. Nothing like that you see in the current Congress. Jim Santelle joins us to remember Jimmy Carter next. You're Up North.
As I'm sitting here doing nothing but aging.
And here with us now is that young college whippersnapper who would later intern in the White House, Mr. Santelle. How are you this morning?
Eons and eons ago, I think the glacier was just receding at the time that I was an intern in the White House. But yes, indeed, and for what it's worth, I realize this is radio, but this is my West Wing pass from the summer of 1980.
Oh,
that person there!
You look like you were painted.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Well, that's
right?
how they did the IDs back then, were oil paintings.
Right, they were. Just right. So in any event, there it is, and yes, all these are going a little bit more seriously. All these not only comparisons, but Jimmy Carter on the one hand and Donald Trump on the other. Could you imagine over the course of 40 years here a more different present, right? Than those two. Right?
Jim, I don't have to imagine. It's happening.
It's happening, right?
It's here in ways.
Right. Or maybe if we don't get leadership in the House, maybe we'll be working on that on the 18th and 19th of January. Who knows,
yes.
Right?
Jim, do me a favor real quick. Pull your mic in a little bit more.
Yes, yeah.
I want to be able to.
There you go.
How's that?
Much
yes,
better. Okay.
Yeah, you want to have it as close to your face as possible without covering your face.
Without covering the face, which would be good again, unless I looked like that.
Knock it off. You still have one chin. Congratulations. All right.
All right. We'll see you in about 3 minutes.
Wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know you're going to accuse me of being too clever by half, but the Sanford and Son theme really works here on two different levels. First is that the official word has come from the Marshfield Clinic Health System. Marshfield has officially merged with Sanford Health of Sioux Falls. See what I did there? Marshfield's 13,000 employees will join Sanford to create a rural-focused nonprofit health system that'll have 56,000 employees with health plans serving almost 500,000 members in 56 hospitals across 7 states. So a very big healthcare merger is now official, with Marshfield Clinic merging with Sanford. It works as well because Sanford and Son itself was on the air from 1972 to 1977, which would include part of the administration of the 39th president, one James Earl Carter, who passed away the other day at the age of 100 and will be laid to rest next week, Thursday, in a state funeral. So many people, of course, in any presidential administration pass through the West Wing at any given point, the Executive Office Building, other posts in Wisconsin and elsewhere. And that might include some fresh, young, wet behind the ears, green, whatever you want to call it, kids. They were kids is what they were. And former U.S. Attorney James Santelle, before he was a big shot U.S. attorney, was a kid from Marquette who served as an intern in the Jimmy Carter White House and joins us a little early to talk about that. Mr. Santelle, good morning. How are you?
Good morning to both of you. A happy new year. And yes, indeed, many, many years ago, right before I headed off to law school, spent another summer in Washington, D.C. I was in the old executive office building with some other interns. And to this day, when I walk by on 17th Street, there's a window way, way up there on like the 19th floor. It's not the 19th floor, but of the old executive office building. No air conditioning. That's where the interns were during that summer. Great honor, great part of my history, of course, but also as we think about Jimmy Carter and the legacy he left, great thoughts on who he was and what he meant.
So while you were there, working in this little cramped and unair-conditioned office, but at some point, somewhere in that area is a window. And you're looking out that window going, all right, this isn't the worst thing in the world as you're looking out at the nation's capital.
Absolutely not. We actually had a view, for what it's worth. It wasn't even the nation's capital. We were looking down, we were looking west into that area. But absolutely, I had an opportunity even prior to that to work for a congressman on Capitol Hill. His name was Clement Zablocki, that many of your listeners may remember. And it was because of that work that Congressman Zablocki, who I also admire tremendously in international relations, other things, of course, for Wisconsin, that I was able to work for one summer, the last summer, as it turned out, of the Carter administration. I was in the domestic policy staff, which at that time was headed up by a woman named Erica Ward, a fellow named Stuart Eisenstadt, who went on to write a very notable, memorable account of Jimmy Carter's time in the White House. And again, one of the things that I recall as we think about the future of America, the future of our world, is the extent to which Jimmy Carter was focused way back then, 1970s and 1980, on environmental issues and the importance of thinking about the future. I had this great opportunity in June and July to be on the south lawn of the White House. In June, he signed something called the Energy Security Act of 1980, talking about how we preserve our future. Didn't really call it climate issues at that time, but talked about things that we need to be concerned about to ensure our future livelihood. He presented in July of that year some things called the President's Awards for Energy Efficiency. And again, thinking about the ways that we use energy in a way that's thoughtful and is mindful of future generations. He put, as we well know, he put those solar panels on the roof of the White House. He was mocked for it somewhat, again, ahead of his time. Ronald Reagan notably took them down. But this is a man who, among many, many other things, which we can chat about, will chat about, obviously, in the days and weeks and months and hopefully years just ahead, was ahead of his time and was telling us the way to go.
Yes, he was, and I want to come back to this. I don't want to miss our main topic of the Carter administration. But you did touch on something that actually took place yesterday. The latest reminder of how the right wing has captured large parts of our judicial system with a ruling that essentially guts something called net neutrality, and in much the same way that President Carter put on solar panels, Ronald Reagan took them down. President Biden passed landmark climate legislation. Donald Trump, undid things from Obama. He's going to undo things from the Biden administration. You now have this court coming in yesterday, this Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, I believe it was, and saying in so many words, nope. Once again, like in the Chevron decision, the government can only do these very limited things, even though they might be the experts on it. If you want, you've got to let judges now be the experts, even though judges are experts on nothing other than the law itself. Jim, it just sounds like another huge step back in this case for American consumers.
Absolutely. And we have talked on this very broadcast about the implications, what I'll refer to as the second most important decision, horrific decision coming out of the Supreme Court in the last term. And that was in this Loper Bright Enterprises case, in which, yes, indeed, they reversed about 40 years of what's called Chevron deference, acknowledging that agency scientists and people who know what they're talking about, in this case, obviously communications people, we shouldn't defer to them. They don't know what they're talking about. Instead, we'll have judges. And you're just right. Interesting, the Sixth Circuit, in again reversing what has been briefly the Biden administration position on net neutrality, says this: we acknowledge that the workings of the internet are complicated and dynamic. Thank you very much, three-judge panel, for acknowledging that that's the case, and that the FCC has significant expertise. So we know that these people know what they're doing. But after the fall of Chevron, it continues, that capability, if you will, cannot be used to overwrite the plain meaning of the statute. Well, they basically are, once again, throwing this to the dogs, if you will, and changing, at least for now, the Sixth Circuit. This will probably go up to the United States Supreme Court, question what they will do, probably affirm the Sixth Circuit.
Probably affirm it, because they're the ones that opened all of this nonsense, to say that now the only way that you can decide things is for Congress to somehow know in advance every little thing that's going to happen, every intended and unintended consequence, and write that into the law. And of course, that's an impossible thing. And that gets to the very heart of what is wrong with originalism as a theory, to say, well, we can only do what people in the 1700s told us to do. Well, damn it, Jim, if that was the case, then we would be regulating guns rather than muskets.
Absolutely. I always say, we've talked on this very broadcast about this. If James Madison were here today, he would be absolutely mystified by what's going on right now, that there's this thing called radio, and that you and I are actually looking hundreds of miles apart, are looking at each other on this thing called the internet, right? Lights and use of electricity, all those things. It is just a ridiculous proposition. Again, the Sixth Circuit just yesterday, once again, invoking that, if you will, to say only we know what the world is all about. And by the way, the agency cannot regulate this at all. It's horrifying.
It's just unbelievable. And by the way, I'm sure you can hear much more about this on Jim's regular show, Amicus, a law review, live tomorrow morning, 9 to 11 on civic media stations around the state. Learn more at civicmedia.us. Now let's get back to remembering the 39th president. What was your exposure, again, as a lowly intern? But what counts in terms of the moments that kind of made your jaw drop? I really doubt that President Carter came upstairs and shook all your hands as you were getting your work done some hot afternoon. But what did count as moments of honor and recognition?
Sure. Here's the superficial piece, and this is headiness again. When you are as young as I was at the time, and you can take this past that I resurrected from my own old annals here, you can walk into the West Wing. And again, while Jimmy Carter did not come to the old executive office building, we went there. I've got some wonderful pictures of in the Roosevelt room with the other interns when he would talk about his vision for America. And again, the word decency, much too overused these days in talking about him, but you could tell that this was a man who was committed to the nation in every word, every deed, every thought that he had. And again, being in the very presence of this man, of the presidents of the United States of America, that is heady in and of itself. Many of the things that we worked on, again, when I say we, Jim Santelle, a very tiny little bit. I wrote some memorandums and attended some meetings, took some notes, those kinds of things. Was basically a gopher for the summer. Do not mean to overstate my role at all. But when it comes to domestic policy, of course, which again, Jimmy Carter often criticized for not being a domestic policy president, but being an overseas president, many things that he began to do, including the Camp David Accords, Egypt and Israel, diplomatic relations with China, again, the Panama Canal treaties, all those kinds of things back in the news again with Donald Trump. We forget that he did many, many things when it comes to attempting to curb what at that time, again, was called stagflation and many other economic things, domestic policy issues. He was very much on the cusp of issues related to race and non-discrimination policies, advancing that. And he talked about that to people both publicly and internally. I was honored to be among those people who was in the room, if you will, when he did that, and had this great opportunity to be a very small part of that last term. At the time, I remember well, he had lunch with us, and a fellow named Bert Karp, who was one of his advisors, looked at us, and in the presence, almost the presence of the president, he had just left, and said, you know, if Ronald Reagan runs a perfect campaign, he will defeat us. And I think all of us thought, how could that possibly be? How could it be that, again, Ronald Reagan, who had its own merits, how could that possibly be that he would be defeating this wonderful human being? And of course, he did by a landslide in November of 1980. All of that, again, remains a part of the history of our time and my history as well. I will be shedding a small tear when I view, as do you and your listeners, what happens next week. We should keep in mind, again, what the presidency can be, should be, even as we compare this terrific man for his life and his presidency, even his pre-presidency, if you will, in Georgia, to what we are going to be seeing, presumably on January 20th and going forward of this month.
It's such a difference between what you saw in terms of service. People, a good man who wanted to serve his country versus those who seek power above all else. The difference between those who want to govern and those who want to rule, those who see government as, belonging to all of us, and others who see government as an impediment, and somehow we should let the so-called magic of the marketplace decide everything. What a whiplash we did in 1980, then again in 2016, and now again coming up this January 20th. And I just don't know, from somebody being as inside as you were at the time, how you even come to terms with that kind of back and forth that, Americans will take their own country.
Absolutely. And again, this notion, which again is a part of the Reagan Revolution, which is, just let it all rip, just let it all happen. Recall once again, Jimmy Carter's accomplishments. He created the Department of Education, huge numbers of things. Time does not permit us, even in the days ahead, to talk about all the things that our Department of Education does, not only in terms of funding, but yes, indeed, setting the tone, the perspective on all sorts of things that should be happening in that setting. The Department of Energy, he created that as well. All of those institutions of government for which we are better. I know government can be criticized. It often is appropriately. What are we doing today? We're talking about dismantling all of those things from which we have benefited, again, from the past 40 years, dismantling them and letting the community, letting the nation just go ahead and do whatever it wants. Jimmy Carter's legacy,
letting corporations do whatever they want, as opposed to Jimmy Carter, who trusted the people. Hold up that West Wing press pass photo one more time for folks watching on social media. For anybody that says that looks more like an oil painting, that is actually how they made press passes back then. Everybody had an oil painting made of them. So
exactly, it was again at the time of the glaciers. That's how we did things. So,
Jim Santelle, thank you so much for a little bit of insight into the 39th president, his administration, and the whole notion of public service. God knows we need to get that back. Jim, thanks so much. Have a great weekend. We'll listen to you on Amicus tomorrow morning.
Here. Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Greg. Happy New Year to you and all your listeners.
Happy New Year to you as well. Today's history lesson coming up right after this. This is Up North News Radio, live from Lake Wissota on the Civic Media Radio Network. There we go. All right.
All right.
You are free, sir. Thank you so much.
We will see you again soon, and Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you very much.
And Jim, it looks like I'll be producing the show for you, I think, next week.
What on Saturday? Yes, wonderful.
A week from Saturday.
A week from Saturday, right? Good. I will look forward to that, and always a pleasure, my friends. Good.
All right.
Have a good weekend. Take care.
See you later.
Yep.
I tell you, that man could he could hold a note, whoever that announcer was for Arsenio Hall, the show that debuted on this day in 1989. I should have looked up who that is. I have no idea. I just know that was how you knew it was showtime when it was time for Arsenio. No, I won't do it. I promise you. But I think it's worth noting for folks like, oh yeah, that old show that was on back in the 90s. I mean, for its time, for those of us who, again, no disrespect to the memory of Johnny Carson, but that was all you'd had for 25 years to that point. Mm-hmm. You know, others had come and gone, and then along comes Arsenio, and it's like, okay, this is a real choice. And there's some real variety. There's things here that would never be. And it's when Johnny Carson started to get spoofed on Saturday Night Live and things like that. But yeah, the show itself premiered on January 3rd, 1989, as part of today's history lesson. What do you got here for me here? Burton Richardson was the name. Doesn't ring a bell. Okay.
Nope.
Anyway, probably died from his lungs exploding at some point from holding those notes. Let's see. Let's go to the rest of today's history lesson, a bit more musically inclined. On this day in 1957, Fats Domino walked into a studio. You'll see what I'm doing here, and recorded this tune.
I'm walking, here's the need, I'm talking, by you and me, I'm hoping.
We're going way back now in the history books to this day in 1521, when Pope Leo the 10th, Pope Leo the 10th excommunicated Martin Luther. That might have been a mistake in hindsight. Born this day in 1892, J.R.R. Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings author, of course, writer, poet, and more. Happy 80th birthday to Stephen Stills from Buffalo Springfield, and of course, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young.
Scary inside. Mostly say hooray for our side. It's time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's
Stephen Still's 80 years old today. 99 years ago today, the birth of Sir George Martin, the fifth Beatle, unofficially. The late producer, arranger, composer, conductor. It would be very tough to top his many innovations with the Beatles. He signed the group to EMI Records in 1962, and it was his expertise as an arranger that helped shape the band's unique sound. Not to take anything away from John and Paul and George and Ringo, but they truly would not be what they became without George Martin.
Correct. Agreed. 100%.
Here's your moment to feel really old, and Roger seconds it on Facebook with this comment. You know you're getting old when Winnie Cooper, actress Danica McKellar, turns 50 years old today.
Winnie Cooper.
Winnie Cooper is 50. Thomas Bangalter is also 50 years old today.
Thomas Bangalter. He's French. He's French.
I was about to say the French electronic musician and half of Daft Punk. Oh, we'll play a little bit from him a little later on.
Yes, sir.
For folks watching on social media or not watching there, I tend to give a cue for playing a tune, and there was a tune there that didn't exist because we're going to play that tune later on. So it looked like I was about to cue him, but instead I was just really emphasizing the point that
I love French electronic music.
and that he is 50 years old today. John Paul Jones, born John Richard Baldwin, is 78 years old today. Here's my cue.
Oh, yeah.
Bass player for Led Zeppelin. He worked with the Stones and the Yardbirds as well. 78 years old today. Alaska was admitted as the 49th U.S. state on this day in 1959. Former quarterback Eli Manning is 44 years old today. The number one song this day in 1970 was by B.J. Thomas.
Raindrops are falling on my head, and just like the guy whose feet are too big for his bed.
On this day in 1990, the U.S. invaded Panama. Manuel Noriega, the former leader, surrendered to American forces over crimes that were committed. Could be telegraphing that something else might be happening with Panama once Donald Trump takes office. Really? This is a guy that got elected because eggs were expensive. And now we're talking about, invading Panama and Greenland. But anyway, let's see. The number one single this day in 1976 was by the Bay City Rollers.
Nope. Oh.
Somebody clearly did not check his cue before giving it to you. Let me know if you get it back.
You talk for a moment.
Okay, well, I will. Well, I tell you that on this day in 2001, the Dave Matthews Band. Remember yesterday's history lesson? And we said we're going to have the perfect show tomorrow. Again, that'll be Monday. Monday, we're going to have a perfect segment for this. But on this day in 2001, the Dave Matthews Band became the first major artist to release a song on Napster, with the song I Did It debuting on the controversial file sharing platform. This is National Chocolate Covered Cherries Day, which you really should have finished all those before Christmas because they sell a ton of them beforehand. National Drinking Straw Day, for better or for worse. This is Fruitcake Toss Day. If you got a fruitcake and you're not going to eat it, toss it today. Yep. This is Right to Congress Day. Good luck with that. They're a little tied up with other things right now. And this is Women Rock Day as well. But before we salute the women, let's again salute the Bay City Rollers, who had the number one hit this day in 1976 with... There we go. Coming up next, we will talk to State Senate Democratic leader Dianne Hesselbein about the new session of the Wisconsin Legislature that kicks off on Monday. This is Up North News Radio, live from Lake Wissota on the Civic Media Radio Network. I'm Pat Kreitlow.
For the record, It was mislabeled.
Did I miss the?
No, me. No, in our
oh.
library. It was in our library.
Oh,
So I'm deleting that file because I don't even know what that song was. So
okay. Noted. Yeah, I could tell right away from your look, like, because I'm like, I didn't think that was wrong, and you're like, that shouldn't have been wrong, and yeah, neither one of us got it wrong. But then, all right. Cool. All right. Hey, Diane. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing? Ready to come back at it again for another session?
Almost ready. My
Almost
son left like at 3 this morning. He had to drive back to St. Louis. So I might take a nap and then I'm going to get
You're right back there. All right. Sounds good. I saw the little video clip that you posted yesterday or the day before, and I think everything else is pretty self-explanatory here. But is there anything in terms of either announcements, events, anything that I should know about?
No, we just put all the committees out there, so that was pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Got that done.
Yeah. No, we'll definitely start with its 6 new faces, right?
Yes.
So we'll be talking about that first off, and then we'll get to the issues. But first, we got news and weather. So I'm going to pop you back in the waiting room and come get you in about 8 minutes or so.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Right, see you in a bit. Ms. Marlowe, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
You got
Happy
a fun,
Friday.
yay. You got a fun weekend plan?
No, not really.
That's the correct answer. Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Brittany, you want to bring that mic a little closer to you, please?
I hate this.
Why?
I don't
we have
know.
to hear you.
Yes. We're big fans.
All right.
Here we go.
All across Wisconsin from Civic Media, this is Up North News Radio. Now, live from our Lake Minnesota studio, here's the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Brightlow.
Hey, good morning. Welcome back to Up North News Radio, unabashedly Wisconsin, brought to you by Courier Newsroom and carried by our friends here on the Civic Media Radio Network at 7:06 on this Friday, January 3rd, 2025. In just a few minutes here, we're going to visit with State Senate Democratic Leader Dianne Hesselbein about the new legislative session that begins on Monday with much thinner Republican majorities thanks to fair maps. Will that lead to a fair session with Democratic bills and ideas getting their day in the sun? We'll ask her about that and other high priorities coming up in the session that begins next week. We'll talk to Mark Jacob in the second half hour about media coverage, both of the Trump transition and the passing of former President Jimmy Carter. Dan Schumacher visits with us near the end of the hour to preview the weekend in sports, including the Packers taking on the Bears. But, of course, it is Friday. We've got a weekend forecast that's coming up. And Rob from Tigerton telling us good morning from Tigerton. It is cloudy and 11 degrees, a wind chill of 2 below. Yesterday, busy doing paperwork and other jobs around the house. You had the theme from Stanford and Son in the last hour. I had a record album of the Bay City Rollers back when I was a kid. I love that song. Too bad Brittany couldn't steer the snow that's going to hit Missouri, Central Illinois our way, but make sure you check your pipes and your sewer pits from freezing with the lack of snow. Brittany, I believe that Rob has covered all the bases. I thought about that yesterday as well. Check those pipes.
Yes, absolutely. This is the time to do it. And he's got a good point because we don't have any snow out there. There's nothing insulating it at all. So we have to be careful for the entire weekend. We're already crashing. Temperatures are feeling like 7 below into areas like Antigo, Phillips, but down by Greg, Kenosha, you're at 21 degrees. So a big spread across the state. We've got clouds more up north, a few flurries still flying, lake effect snow still with a winter weather advisory into Iron County. Another 1 to 3 inches of snowfall is expected there, but the rest of us in a dry spell this weekend. It's going to be sunny and cold with high temperatures today in the low to mid teens. But of course, with a few flurries flying around and winds starting to get breezy, gusting around 20 to 25 miles per hour, it's really going to be feeling more like 7 below, probably for our highs for a lot of us. And then overnight tonight, as our temperatures fall to near zero and those winds still feisty, it's going to be feeling more like 20 below. So a pretty cold morning tomorrow. We stay chilly tomorrow as well with highs into those teens again, but the winds start to ease just a little bit. So we will be feeling a little bit warmer near 0 degrees, and we'll slowly warm up into Sunday with highs in the upper teens and then low 20s by Monday. But like Rob said, there is a big snow and ice storm hitting south. I mean, this is so far south, it's into like central Illinois, Missouri, Nebraska, but they're looking at 1 to 2 feet of potential snow, major ice accumulations. And while I don't like the ice, that snow sounds fun.
Yeah, unless you're traveling. And
exactly.
This is a big travel weekend for folks who got the kind of the extended holiday break. And needless to say, it's going to be a bit of a character builder for folks who have to go through that.
Yeah, and especially down south, they don't deal with it as often as we do, so they're not as prepped.
I believe Glenn Campbell sang, if it snows, that stretch down south won't ever stand the strain. But that was a song that we've never played for you before, Brittany, so don't worry about it.
Okay.
Wichita lineman. It sneaks up on you. You just never know when.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brittany. Have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
All right. Before we get to Senator Dianne Hesselbein to talk about the legislature, I wanted to note one comment from Alicia talking about the new Wisconsin Congressman Tony Weed. saying, how open do you think Tony Weed would be to me calling today and asking him to vote for Hakeem Jeffries to be Speaker of the House? And Alicia, I put it up here because you know what? It's not an impossible thing. The Republicans are going to be voting today for Speaker of the House as the new Congress opens up. And, Mike Johnson is going to have to work hard for every possible vote to become the Speaker. He can only afford to lose one vote, and he's surely looking to lose more than that on the first ballot. But it is not impossible that some Republicans would vote for Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, to make him Speaker so that they would have somebody to blame for their own gridlock, the gridlock that got nothing done the past 2 years. And, they're always looking for a villain. So, Alicia, I get that it's tongue in cheek, but I would say call up Congressman Weed anyway. What have you got to lose to see how this works out? All right, let's move it from the congressional level to the legislative level and welcome in Senate Democratic Leader Dianne Hesselbein from Middleton. Leader Hesselbein, good morning. Nice to have you back on Up North News Radio.
Good morning. Good morning. And I was glad to hear about the weather. I have a son who's 29, and he took off early this morning because he's driving back to St. Louis to go back to school. So,
Ooh.
Yeah.
Better to get an early start. Yes.
Exactly. I was like, go as much as I want you to stay until Sunday. The weather's going to be bad, so you might as well go early.
That's right. So we get into this new session of the legislature, and you begin with the Senate Democratic Caucus with a bunch of new faces, half a dozen of them, if memory serves, after the November election, and thanks to fairer maps and things like that. So you've got a whole new brood over there.
We do. It's an exciting time. We got two new from the Assembly, Dora Drake and Melissa Ratcliffe, who were in the Assembly for a number of years. And then we've got 4 new people in the state Senate. So we are ready. We are so excited and ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked to every one of them throughout the course of their various campaigns, as they were running. And I wanted to make sure I had the list here. You mentioned Dora. We've also got Jamie Wall from Green Bay, Kristen Elfhine, Sarah Kieski, Jody Haber-Sinekin. And so it's reminiscent of my being elected to the state Senate in 2006, when there were 4 of us new faces, just enough to give the Senate Dems the majority back then. And there's really not a lot of time to dwell on that. You've got to hit the ground running. And even though Democrats are in the minority this time, you're hitting the ground running in terms of trying to prepare a state budget with a $4 billion surplus, which to 99% of the population sounds like, okay, we can find a way to craft a win-win out of that. And it just seems like for these past few years, legislative Republicans are somehow allergic to doing a win-win proposal on a state budget that takes a surplus and does something for everybody. Any thought that with the fair maps and a smaller majority, you might see something closer to a win-win this time?
I'm not sure. I think we're going to see a few win-wins. I don't know what they're going to be. I have a hard time believing it's going to be about the surplus right now, but things change, the winds change, and people change their minds. Right now, the Republican Party all they're talking about is tax cuts. I haven't seen their proposals. Everything they touted last time is a no-go because they do a lot of target tax cuts for the extreme wealthy and not really for the middle class. It has to be very targeted tax cuts. Maybe some property tax relief would be nice to see. I've mentioned that to the other party. We'll see if they can get there. But let's be clear, we have that $4 billion because we haven't been funding K-12 schools like we should have for a decade. So all these people all across Wisconsin have been raising their property taxes to keep their neighborhood schools up and running in the way they want them to be. Maybe it'd be better to give us a little bit of property tax relief, since all those people made those decisions to raise their taxes because the state of Wisconsin was falling down on the job.
Yeah, exactly. It's the old saying that if you've got, $100 in the bank and a hole in the roof, you don't actually have $100 in the bank because you got to fix that hole in the roof. Exactly. And you've got schools that have been underfunded for, some 16 years here, not keeping up with the rate of inflation. So yeah, you'll have some people saying, put it directly into property tax relief. Others saying put it directly into schools. But I don't want to get ahead of myself here, because before you talk about any kind of spending on schools or the UW or economic development or anything, with a multi-billion-dollar surplus, I think Republicans are in fact going to at least lead with some kind of a tax cut proposal. And you stated 3 different times in the last session, Republicans put forward tax cuts that were disproportionately geared toward the very wealthy. Again, it's not your job to predict how they're going to behave, but I'm sure that's going to be their opening gambit. But how do you feel about the possibility that all of this begins with a tax cut that is more geared toward working families before you decide what else to do with the state budget?
My door is always open to their ideas. And so, that's why I said if it's the thing they did last session, they touted out that I wouldn't be interested. But if they come to something that's more targeted, definitely I'd be interested in having that conversation with them.
Yeah, it just seems that the more we've talked about what has happened over the years with Governor Evers in office, and comparing that to, say, Foxconn, that making those targeted decisions on Main Street businesses or in other businesses like Microsoft and Lilly down in southeast Wisconsin, that we're increasingly getting the picture that these broad-based, whether it's $3 billion to Foxconn or a big, massive, across-the-board tax cut geared toward the very wealthy, these are not responsible fiscal decisions, and that Democrats, have been proposing the things that are fiscally sound and have a much better payoff down the road. I would expect that Governor Evers will be unveiling something similar either in the State of the State address this month or the budget address next month.
I believe he will. And I think you're right. Some of these, tax cuts they want to give blow holes in future budgets as well. So they're not written away that's sustainable. So we'll see. We'll see what they want to do. I've also said that we need to put money out there for PFAS that's sitting in the Joint Finance Committee right now. The Republicans won't release it. There's a lot of things that we should be doing for education. You mentioned higher ed as well, technical colleges, workforce development, helping Main Street businesses. There's so much we could be doing with that money, but unfortunately, all the Republicans want to talk about are tax cuts right now.
Which gets us to this notion of we're talking about a new budget when there's still unfinished business from the old budget, this $125 million that they've been sitting on, holding hostage, that could have been put to work already, cleaning PFAS, industrial chemicals, out of our drinking water. And amazing, it kind of is amazing to me that they haven't paid more of a price, that there hasn't been more of an outcry about the $50 million that they're sitting on for literacy programs, the $15 million for Chippewa Valley healthcare. Do you feel like those things from the last session are going to be stumbling blocks to getting this new budget bill written?
It's going to be interesting. Last time they needed our votes to pass 3 different big bills. They needed it for the alcohol licensing overview. They needed it for the Milwaukee Brewers stadium upgrade and shared revenue. So we're going to see. They have such a small majority with a lot of people that like to vote no. So yeah. I think I'm going to be spending a lot of time with Devin Lemieux and Mary Falkowski trying to figure out how do we get this group to yes.
I can definitely see that. Dianne Hesselbein, the Senate Democratic leader, is our guest. We'll continue our conversation in just a moment. This is Up North News Radio, live from Lake Wissota on the Civic Media Radio Network. Here we go. Okay, we're in a 2-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll go till 7:29. Okay.
Wonderful. My hair is doing something in the front.
It's fine. It's good. It's radio. Come on.
Well, it's video too.
Well, okay. You caught me. How does Monday look planning wise? I suppose you have
exciting. We've got a lot of them that are going to have their own. Judge Dallett's going to do some individuals before the big one, so that's really nice. So more of their family and friends can see it, since seating is so limited.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're all having like open houses. They're so excited. I mean,
oh,
you know what that's like when you get all these new members and shot in the arm. You're like,
yes, I'm excited for them. That's going to be wonderful. And yeah, I really enjoyed seeing the committee makeup here. I think that it's going to be. Some spirited discussions are going to be held in committee, and I'm here for that. So
yeah, the other thing that's interesting, happy to talk about, is a bunch of them were all the same age.
Yeah,
born in 71. So it's like Jamie Wall, Kieski, myself, and Alfine.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, isn't that wild that you're like, you look at the four
It
of
is.
us and you're like,
What is it? Is that tail end of Gen X then? What is
yeah,
that?
we're Gen
Okay.
X.
All
We're
right.
solid. Yeah, Scott Ross would be thrilled. We've made it.
We finally did it. We're here,
We
Scott.
finally did it. We're
Hope
here.
you're watching this, Scott. It's about damn time. Oh, that's funny. All right, making that note, sending that after the show to him. So, okay, so that'll be on Monday, and then things are kind of quiet until State of the State, I would assume.
I think so. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be in much.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. We will get going here in just about 30 seconds.
Okay.
You better think about what you're trying to do to me. Think, let your mind go, let yourself be free.
Here's something we didn't cover in our history lesson at 6:50. It was on this day in 1987 that the second class of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was announced, and it included the first woman in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That, of course, would be Aretha Franklin. Welcome back to Up North News Radio on this Friday morning. It's January 3rd, just about 7:22, and we are visiting with State Senate Democratic Leader Dianne Hesselbein of Middleton. The legislature kicks off its new session on Monday. And with the inauguration of new members, and we were talking about the fresh faces, and we were talking during the break, Senator Hesselbein, about the fact that there is literally a new generation on the Capitol steps about to come in. And as one of the very, very earliest Gen Xers, I'm looking at you youngins in the Gen X time frame and saying, welcome. It's about time we got you here.
It's about time. It's amazing that all of our flips are Gen X, right? We figured out that a lot of them graduated in 1989, so same as I did. So it's kind of fun. We all looked at each other like, wait, what? How old are you? How old are you? You know, because you don't usually have those conversations on the campaign trail. Who cares? But they all made it through, and Gen X has arrived.
Well, it'd be curious then to see what motivated them. When I came in 2006, it was a lot of frustration with the Iraq War and other things about George W. Bush. People, before that were motivated by various factors. And so I think as we get to talking to all the new members, and again, we talk to them as candidates, but we're going to talk to them now as senators to talk about their story and what motivated them. I mean, do you give a typical origin story as far as what motivated you to first run for office?
Well, I ran for office for the Middleton Cross Plains Area School District Board of Education. I was at a meeting, and just as a parent, I had 3 little kids, and somebody in the audience said something racist, and nobody said anything. Nobody said, we don't say those things, or what are you talking about, or that's not okay. But I said that. And then I thought, I don't really want to live in a community where people don't check that or don't, that make that somehow okay. So I ran in 2005, and I made it through.
Gosh, we were just talking about that last hour with Jim Santelle about Jimmy Carter and the whole notion of, actually putting decency back into public service. And I guess let's try to put some perspective on this with Donald Trump coming into office. And there are those folks who are saying, well, Democrats were saying all through the campaign, this is going to be the end of democracy. And now that Trump has won, they're like, well, we're going to try to do the best they can. We're Democrats, exaggerating the threat. And I would contend, no, I don't think there was an exaggeration of the threat, but we are where we are right now. And all you can really do is continue to prove that there are still decent service-minded people in office. That's certainly what I see in your caucus, both the new senators and the ones who've been there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I have said for so long, and now that we have fair maps, and I really do think the Democrats, with great candidates in 2 years and with fair maps, I think we're going to be able to take the majority. But remembering why we got into this work in the first place, I think power, it can be difficult, right, for people to handle. But when you treat people correctly and you treat them the right way, then I think we're going to be looking out for all Wisconsinites.
As we look at the issues that will have to be dealt with, of course, we've mentioned the surplus, we've mentioned tax cuts, education, things like that. One issue that is sure to come up again is accepting the federal money to strengthen Badger Care by expanding Medicaid coverage. Wisconsin is one of only 10 states now that have had Republican leadership all this time, and so they've continued their temper tantrum against the Affordable Care Act and not accepted it. Do you feel like, again, with the smaller majorities for Republicans, there may be some kind of a tipping point toward full or partial accepting of expanded Medicaid coverage for Wisconsin families?
I believe that the Senate Republicans will be open to that conversation. It is very clear that Speaker Robin Vos is not, and he has made it clear that as long as he is Speaker, that will not be happening in the state of Wisconsin, which is too bad because, as you mentioned, all these other states have taken it. And really, why don't you want your friends and neighbors to have the best health care possible that they can have? It doesn't make any sense to me. It never has. Years ago, the Republicans said it's all going to go away when there's a Republican president, Congress, and Senate. We saw that trifecta with Trump. It still didn't go away. So I said, look, it's not going away. They're not doing it. I told you they wouldn't do it. You can't unravel the Affordable Care Act and Badger Care expansion. I'll continue to have that conversation. I'll argue that on the floor.
And Senator Mary Felskowski, the Senate president, has also said that expanding Medicaid is a non-starter. So let me try to come at it then from the half-a-loaf approach, if you will, on two different things. One, on Medicaid expansion. If not the full Medicaid expansion, might we see some motion toward covering more women postpartum instead of 6 weeks, giving them 12 months of Medicaid secure, affordable, stable coverage? Because I believe we're now up to 48 states that do that. And
49. Yeah, 48. It's us and Arkansas are the only ones.
Us and Arkansas.
Arkansas, of all states, that we have that in common. So we did pass that in the Senate, and then it died in the Assembly. The only person I think that voted against it in the Senate was Dewey Strobel, who's no longer here.
Right.
So I'm hopeful we can bring that up again, pass it, and get that done, because right now people just get 60 days, I think, postpartum care, and everyone knows that at day 61, boom, you're not all magically wonderful better. Things happen all the time. So getting people postpartum coverage, if they need it, is extremely important for the state of Wisconsin residents.
So that's one thing we may hear in terms of at least making some progress on Medicaid expansion. And then in terms of education, if not, the full amount that Superintendent Underly is looking for, there certainly has been a lot said about the one part about special education, where special education costs are reimbursed around 35% or so for public school districts, but 90% for voucher schools. And I think as more people learn that and say, how did this get to be a thing? What are your thoughts that special education reimbursement might be at least one of those potential win-wins that is struck in this new state budget?
Well, people should be outraged because it really is not fair for school districts to have to cover that entire cost. We have so many students who need help, and they deserve the help, and they are wonderful, and they just need a little extra boost in the classroom and sometimes out of the classroom, and that costs dollars. So absolutely, that'll be part of our discussions going forward. Special ed funding and also mental health funding, not just K-12 schools, but all over the board. We need to do more with mental health.
And Corinne Hendrickson and everybody else, we didn't forget you. Child care counts. Child care costs are crazy. And again, Republicans have consistently blocked that. The extended funding that Governor Evers reallocated is scheduled to run out in June. And so something has to be done about that as well. Dianne Hesselbein will be leading all of this for Senate Democrats. Dianne, thank you again very much for the visit. Enjoy the inauguration day on Monday, and we'll check in with you throughout the session.
Thanks so much, Pat. Appreciate you.
You bet. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New
When
Year.
we come back, Mark Jacob joins us. This is Up North News Radio on the Civic Media Radio Network. There we go. All right. We are in break. Dianne, thanks again so much. That was awesome. All right. We'll see you. Howdy, Mark.
Hi, Pat. How are you? Did you get some rest?
Yeah. It was nice to just take a little complete time off. Boy, I commented on somebody on either Blue Sky or Twitter who said they haven't watched CNN or MSNBC in any large scale form since Election Day. And I realized I'm in that same boat and I feel good.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I'm getting enough information online. I feel like I can check out sources, responsibly. I just don't need the hours of incessant talk about things that make me crazy,
And they keep on talking about the same things too. Because it's easier to just rehash stuff than to
right.
do reporting. That's the thing that everyone's forgetting to do is reporting. Actually sending reporters out to find out things.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, anyway, do you have a good holiday break?
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, it's low key, which is as good. Getting rested up for the Trump administration. That should be a real bed of roses.
Yeah, I know. Okay, let's see. I don't have anything special here. My very sketchy checklist is Trump and New Orleans, and of course, lying about it being an immigrant. We got net neutrality is somehow a blow to Democrats. The LA Times publisher wants to start a conservative version of The View. And as far as Jimmy Carter's passing, is there anything much that we can say about the so-called October surprise and the degree to which Reagan and or the campaign was coordinating with the Iranians to not release the hostages before the election?
I'd be happy to talk about it. It's one of those things that it's old now and so it's history, so nobody pays any attention to it. In other words, they got away with it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Let's see. I'll come get you in 3 minutes.
Okay, cool.
Ladies and gentlemen, Greg Bach will be stepping to the microphone next to give us the correct pronunciation of half of Daft Punk, whose song you're hearing here. He's got to put on his beret, put down his baguette, and Mr. Bach, the birthday boy's name today is?
Thomas Bangalter.
No, I'm sorry. That can't possibly be right. If you say so, all right.
Bye.
I took 3 years of French in high school, and I would have butchered that any way, shape, or form. So thank you for that. Mark Jacob joins us now. We're going to talk about coverage of the passing of former President Jimmy Carter, and certainly the Trump transition as well. You can also catch his Stop the Presses newsletter at stopthepresses.news. Mark, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. Where do we want to start here? I'm going to start with something that we discussed in our last hour with former U.S. Attorney Jim Santelle about this Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling that strikes down the concept of net neutrality. And it's an offshoot of a very conservative Supreme Court decision recently that is going to make it much harder for federal agencies to write rules that can protect consumers against things like price gouging. And yet, rather than this being a blow to consumers, there was this New York Times headline that said the net neutrality ruling is, quote, a blow to Democrats. Right. And again, we're right back into the framing of the horse race rather than their own readers and how they are going to be affected by things that are in the news.
You know, and Pat, think about this. We're talking about the horse race when no horses are in the starting gate at all yet. Yeah. I mean, we're like 2 years from the next midterm election, 4 years from the next presidential election, yet the New York Times can't be distracted with the issue of what's good for the American people. I mean, because this net neutrality thing is, and the whole issue of federal regulation has tremendous implications for regular people doing their regular lives. It's not just one of those things that's a DNC or RNC issue. It's it just astounds me that the New York Times and many other major media just can't cover news events and politics and government from a perspective of how it affects real people.
From the standpoint of the consumer or the voter, whatever the case may be, to let people know that in the case of net neutrality, that your telecom provider could decide to slow down your internet speed, and suddenly you can't watch things on Netflix or whatever. You're going to get all this buffering because they're giving preferential treatment to their big customers. I mean, imagine if that were done with your water or your sewer service or anything like that. And yet this court is saying, the corporations can essentially write their own rules at this point.
Yeah, that Chevron ruling, the ruling you're talking about is that could have effects in a number of industries, because basically what the Supreme Court, the Republican-led, somewhat illegitimate, in my opinion, Supreme Court has decided is that unless Congress specifically says something in its actual legislation, gets down into the weeds, that the government can't, write rules. I mean, it could have tremendous implications to allow pollution, to allow shoddy consumer products, it really is just a green light for bad business.
And so when we talk about framing, there's one other post that caught my eye, and I think it caught yours as well, from economist Dean Baker. And it's about the notion of tariffs. And I know we've talked about tariffs a lot throughout the campaign, but he wonders aloud, what's taking the national press so long to refer to tariffs in a more consumer-driven way, that they are a tax. They are a tax on imports. And is it that newsrooms want to sound smart, and so they use as highfalutin a language as possible, or are they just oblivious to explaining some of these concepts to consumers who supported Trump, saying, those tariffs, he's going to go take it to China,
right?
When they clearly that's not how this works.
No, nobody with a brain thinks that. All the experts are saying, clearly that tariffs are a tax on American consumers. But I guess the reason that they won't explain, the news media won't explain it clearly to the people of America, is that Kamala Harris and the Democrats explained it real clearly to the American people. They called it a tax. In effect, it's a sales tax, because anything you want to buy that has any foreign origin may cost more, and it's going to fuel inflation and everything like that. And Democrats said that before the election, didn't work. And partly the reason it didn't work is what you just said, is that the news media often refuse to explain it clearly.
Well, it again gets back to that notion that of reporters who feel like if Republicans say one thing and it's a lie or it's a exaggeration or whatever, and the Democrat says the other thing and it's the truth, and they then write the truth, if they then say a tariff is a tax on imports, that they're going to be accused of political bias.
Right.
In other words, you're punishing the people who are telling the truth by refusing to tell your readers that they're telling the truth. It's a paradox I never thought I'd see in my lifetime.
Well, and the fact is that when two sides argue something, often they don't have equally valid arguments. I mean, come on, this is reality. If I think I eat 6 bags of cookies and I believe it's going to make me skinnier, and my wife says, no, that's a stupid thing to do, Mark. Well, we're not equally valid. And we wrote a news story about it. We wouldn't say, well, some people think if you eat 6 bags of cookies, it's going to make you skinnier. Yeah. I mean, this is, and on a vast scale, this is what the news media is doing right now. It's making everything into an opinion.
That's perfect, because yes, if there was a Koch brothers funded think tank that put out a research paper that said that one Dutch scientist has given us reason to believe that 6 bags of cookies a day will help you lose weight, I mean, Fox News would take that and run with it all day. I mean, you'd be seeing nothing but cookie ads from these guys.
And the cookie manufacturers would be donating to the Republican Party.
Oh God, in ways, that we've never seen before. By the way, who did it? I think Robert Reich made a note of all the companies that spoke out against the insurrection 4 years ago and said that they were pausing their political donations. But the companies that have now contributed big bucks to Donald Trump's inauguration campaign, and you don't see the reporting on that the way that you saw the reporting 4 years ago that, this company and this company, they are sharply condemn, Donald Trump, and they're not going to give political contributions anymore. Where's the reporting now?
Right. There's not enough, at least. And that, that also goes back to the net neutrality thing, because some of the biggest people who are folding right now are, the big tech people, and Zuckerberg at Meta seems to be really kissing up to Trump. Elon Musk is, cheerleading for fascists in other countries as well as this one. And so this whole kind of take the gloves off, take all the guardrails off of the worst aspects of American capitalism, and you're going to, that's what you're going to see in the next 4 years, I'm afraid. And ultimately, it's just not good for people.
Well,
people don't want their food poisoned. They don't want sludge and toxic stuff in their rivers. They don't want that, and it's a good reason they don't want it. But politicians who are throwing the sludge and toxic sludge in the rivers do want it, and so if they pay enough to the right people in government, they may get it.
Yeah, and you get media leaders that frankly want to see that out there, which takes me to the news story about the publisher of the Los Angeles Times, who famously, canceled an editorial about the presidential campaign. Reportedly is now talking to, who was it? Rob Schneider and Cheryl Hines about starting a
comedian and the wife of RFK Jr.
Yeah, about starting a conservative version of The View, the ABC talk show. Again, if you're a reporter, if you're a journalist for the LA Times, boy, it's nice to get a paycheck, but you really got to wonder if it isn't time to move on.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, I've been in that. I've worked for terrible owners. I worked for Murdoch at one time when he owned the Sun-Times for a couple of years in Chicago when I was worked there. And it was, pretty excruciating. Some part of it was, but there was still some good journalism being done. And so you could tell yourself, I'm not part of that. I'm part of this and all that. And Los Angeles certainly needs a good local newspaper. In effect, the Los Angeles Times purported to be, California's newspaper. And it's a big state. It needs to be serviced by good journalism. But I got to tell you, there comes a time and I've experienced this myself. I left the Sun-Times, when Conrad Black, another terrible owner, owned it. and they took a lesser job across the street because of it. But so what I'm saying is that I think there comes a time when you just got to go. You just can't work for terrible owners who are doing damage not only to your newspaper, your news institution, but to the country in general. This guy is doing this. He's doing the same thing Zuckerberg's doing, the same thing Musk did. He's sucking up to fascists who have power. And you've seen it in a lot of autocracies. You see that. You see that that's what the whole oligarch thing is about, is really rich people who want to stay really rich and get even richer, sucking up to abusive people who want autocratic power and trying to keep them in power.
By the way, it reminds me of a post I saw last night from somebody that said, basically, if at any time a politician blames something on immigrants, if you just replace immigrant with oligarch, chances are that's going to be a truer statement, and that's what more people should be talking about. So enough about the people up in the C-suites. Let's come back down to the newsroom level, where, again, you're looking for, in breaking news, you're looking to be cautious. You don't want to be too cautious because you'll miss the story. But on the other hand, when you've got a president-elect talking about the New Orleans attacker, and then he attacks this person as an immigrant and talks about open borders, other Republicans, other Republican news outlets follow, and it's not true. But because of the guy's name and skin color, of course, they assume he's an immigrant. It again is just this reminder that you have to watch every word you say during breaking news, even if you do have a political agenda, Mark, at your at right wing network, A or B or C. There's still got to be something said about accuracy, at least now.
Yeah,
and then.
I used to remind people, at my news shops that that it's really way more important to be right than to be first. I mean, you want to be both, but it's way more important to be right. And it's really it's so painful when you make a mistake like that. And the thing is that let's not talk. Here's the thing I want to get across. These are not honest mistakes. When Fox News announces that, well, it sure looks like the attacker in New Orleans came across the border in a truck 2 days ago. When they say that, that's not just an honest mistake. That's a mistake or an inaccurate statement because it wasn't true at all. From a news outlet that had to pay $750 million for lying about the 2020 election. I mean, these people. That's what they do. The lying is their brand. And so what bothers me is when the New York Times and others say, well, there's just an honest mistake. I guess Trump made a mistake. There was a MSNBC of all people yesterday were saying, well, Trump wouldn't admit he made a mistake in his initial Truth Social post. It wasn't a mistake.
It wasn't
Pat.
a mistake.
He doesn't care what the truth is.
Right. No. I've left us too little time to reflect on the passing of President Carter, so I'm just going to give you 30 seconds here to talk about either what you remember most about his presidency or the coverage of it now all these years later.
Well, it is sad that all the good things that people say about him now and have said for the last few decades that they weren't saying that, in 1980. That was, I think, a failure of news coverage as well. Back then, everyone liked, everyone, the news media loves the shining new product, the new guy on the horse who's coming to rescue everyone, and that's what they pretended Reagan was. And you can trace a lot of bad stuff that's happening now to Reagan. You really can.
Yeah. We've talked about that the other day. If we'd had perhaps more critical reporting in 1980, we might have saved this country a lot of trouble. Mark Jacob, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Have a good weekend.
See you later.
All right. When we come back, Dan Schumacher, can the Packers beat the Bears for a 12th straight time? What do you think Dan's going to say? We'll tell you that answer next. You're Up North.
We're up all night for good fun. We're up all night to get lucky. We're up all night to get lucky. We're up all night.
Well, welcome back.
It's a freshly shorn Dan. No more beard for the man.
You are freshly shorn over there. What happened? It's you walk into
yeah, it was just time to get rid of the beard.
Okay.
It's
All
time to
right.
get rid of the beard. You know what's crazy? It's still dark here.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like 7:30. It's
It's
almost 8 o'clock, and it's barely light out right
it's
now.
nice and light here now. So it's that whole tilting of the Earth on its axis thing, I guess.
Oh, you're a round earther. That's adorable.
That's such fake news, I tell
Yeah.
you. I gotta go find if we got time. I'm gonna mention this. Have you seen about this new indoor golf league?
Is
Okay.
it with a simulator?
Yes. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's
didn't
part
Tiger,
simulator.
Isn't it Tiger and Rory that
Yes.
started that?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah. This. I'm gonna explain how it works and then get your thought on it. So.
All right.
So we got that. And we got where's my other sports? Let's see.
Where's my other sport?
Probably the
Where's
biggest topic is the college playoffs and, of course, the Bears-Packer game Sunday.
Yep.
But even bigger game is the Detroit-Vikings game. The Vikings-Detroit game is in the evening, and it'll shake things up if the Vikings win, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Let's see. We got.
All right, about 20 seconds to back.
Okay.
I don't think I've seen the sun in a week.
Well, your Friday morning fix of Grateful Dead tunes is back now that Dan Schumacher is back and Greg Bach is spinning the turntables for him. What do we have this morning, gentlemen?
We haven't been on in a while, but did any of you catch the Kennedy Awards where the Grateful Dead got their Kennedy Award?
I did not. Did you enjoy it?
I did. I thought some of the performances interpretations of their songs, Queen Latifah sang a song by the Dead was out
Really?
there. I mean, just really a mixture of great vocalists. Did their own version of what those songs were, but it was it came out on the 22nd of December, so it was a good night. It was a cold evening, so it was nice to sit and eat some popcorn and listen to that good music.
Very nice. All right.
Absolutely. They had celebrities on stage in tie-dye dancing because they were all like these deadhead Hollywood celebrities.
They even had a VW van out on the stage.
Yeah.
Very nice. All right. Let's turn to some sports here. Badger men's basketball against Iowa. Coverage begins at 5 this evening on several Civic Media stations and the app. Head to civicmedia.us to learn more. Of course, well, let's start with college football real quick here. We mentioned this earlier, that the 4 teams that got the bye, teams 1, 2, 3, and 4, are not in the Final Four. The teams in the Final Four are teams 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Mm-hmm.
Dan, the bye is not the prize that we used to think that it was, no matter what sport you're talking about.
Yeah, it's just a matter of who. I mean, the bye might have, it kind of comes to the argument of some of these pro teams. Are they going to sit their starters, even though, before the playoffs, taking a week off, you get an extra week. Maybe it was hard to shake off the rust, especially Oregon didn't look very good, and they were the number 1 team in the whole country.
Right.
And Ohio State looked like all world after they lost to Michigan, and they've come roaring back through the playoffs. So it's been interesting. I enjoyed the Notre Dame game last night. I thought that was high energy, even for the circumstances. I've never heard of a bowl game being moved from the night before because of the tragedy in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
But it was an entertaining game.
And again,
the SEC, there's nobody from the SEC in the Final Four.
No, there was never in Alabama to begin with, and now Georgia, the number 2 team, upset by Notre Dame. So your Final Four are Notre Dame versus Penn State next Thursday in the Orange Bowl, and Ohio State versus Texas next Friday in the Cotton Bowl. The championship will be Monday, January 20th in Atlanta. So of that Final Four, Dan, if you had to pick one right now?
Well, I mean, Texas basically got a home game, playing at the Cotton Bowl. So I would say I like Texas over Ohio State. I think the glass slipper's about to break for Ohio State. But, I really like the way Notre Dame was playing. I think they played hard, fast, tough football. They're well coached. I mean, what won them the game last night was the unbelievable call by the special teams coach, where you had your punting team out there all set up, and at the drop of a dime, the entire 11 run off the field, and the offense comes on, which creates disturbance on Georgia's side, trying to get people shuffled in. The argument is, did you get proper substitution time? You know, the refs got to sort that out in their closed meeting, but I thought it was an excellent game. I just thought they were a lot of good games, and now we're moving into the pro. You know, today we'll decide some AFC teams for the pros.
Yeah.
Or I should say tomorrow.
Yep.
And so, yeah, football's in full swing, and we got that Bears-Packers game on Sunday. Which I would concede that the Bears are going to get killed.
So that would be 12 straight wins by the Packers over the Bears, conceivably. 12 o'clock noon Sunday at Lambeau Field. Hear the game on Civic Media Stations in Richland Center, Park Falls, and Racine Kenosha. Congrats to Packer safety Xavier McKinney, selected as a Pro Bowl starter. But all of that is kind of the undercard to, and I never thought I'd say this, Vikings-Lions. For all the marbles on the NFC for the number one seed. I mean, cheers to both teams. They both had a hell of a season. That's going to be a very good game Sunday night to watch.
Yep, it will be. I think I'm cheering for Detroit. I want to see them keep the number one seed, playoff games, things that they've never experienced as an organization.
Yep. Let's see. Bucks lost to Brooklyn at home last night, 113-110. They will host Portland on Saturday. And then the last thing I wanted to make time for here was this notion that Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy and others are starting this indoor golf league. It's a combination of simulator golf and actual shots, including a putting surface that can rotate 360 degrees and change angles and slopes. And so you make a 35-yard shot into a screen, 64 feet wide, 53 feet high, and then it's actual shots around the stadium after that with a 40-second shot clock. Mm-hmm. I'm so intrigued to see, is this new and innovative and catches on, or if people look at it and go, get that out of here?
Hey, across the whole country, every college right now has an esports team.
That's true.
Esports. Yeah. So it doesn't surprise me at all that they took this step, and I think it's a genius move. You've got two main players that are the names in golf supporting it and funding it and getting it going. So, you know, I think it can go somewhere, just like esports has grown tremendously. I mean, I think like UW Stout, they've got 60 kids in that program. So it's an enrollment thing for colleges. It's an interest thing for grumpy old men like us that can't play golf.
It'll be something new to talk about. Yep. So we'll get that at least. All right. Dan Schumacher, Executive Director of Athletics for Northland College. Thank you, sir. Have a great weekend.
Hey, winter is here.
That's right. It's definitely there in Ashland.
Yes, it is.
Greg Bach is back in 2 hours for Matt and Air on Air.
Yes, sir. Our 1 year anniversary today. Woo!
Hey, way to go. Congratulations. And have a great weekend. I'll talk to you on Monday. Thanks to our guests as well. State Senator Dianne Hesselbein for joining us, Jim Santelle, Mark Jacob, and of course, Dan Schumacher. And thanks to all of you for being here. On Monday, we'll talk to John Shelton about Democratic messaging after recent elections. Then on Tuesday, Congressman Mark Pocan will be joining us about the new Congress. Up North News is the outlet for Courier Newsroom, a pro-democracy news network building a more informed, engaged, and representative America. I'm Pat Kreitlow. We'll see you Monday morning back here up north. Have a great weekend.